Russell Johnson, everybody. The mellifluous tones of Russ
man.
Johnson.
Starting on a high note.
I like to set the expectations real high right off the bat. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good. We're all moved in to our new place. And so
All right.
the one thing about moving, the whole process is it's really a process in learning that you actually hate everything you own.
Because you have to move it like 3 times and you're like, God, I hate this thing.
First, you like declutter. So you get rid of like a third of everything you have, or you put it into storage, which is some of what we did. And then you realize that your life has not changed at all with like 1/3 less of your stuff in it. So you start wondering
you why. Buy without it. Yep.
Yeah, like no change at all. Like, why do I have any of this stuff? Now I've discovered this like final phase of moving, which is everything is in boxes, and we have no idea where anything is. So what we've been doing is we wind up going out and buying stuff that we already have just because we don't know where all the stuff that we moved is anymore. I don't know if you've had this experience.
I have had that experience, and I've been there almost 6 years now. We still have boxes that we've never opened and put away just because we always are going to get that out when we finish the next renovation.
Yeah, exactly.
But, we do know where everything is now, but there's got to be a better way, doesn't there?
I need I need like an app that will tell me what's in every single box. So I can like take a picture of a box.
Take a picture, exactly.
Name it, map it to a location.
Moving companies should get on that. I mean, that seems like a pretty simple thing to do right there.
I think I need to just put it in the backyard, set it on fire, convert to Buddhism, and then I think I'll be
go with the simple lifestyle, the non-material.
All right, so I think that concludes our shtick portion of the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propelics. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propelics is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propelics clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propelics' menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propelics offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. Today we have with us Russell Johnson. Russ, this is our very first client interview podcast. So,
wow, okay.
Yeah, so congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So Russ is an enterprise architect at Cintas.
Yes.
And I see here that you are the enterprise architect in the Cintas Center of Excellence team, and that your team is responsible for building and governing the enterprise architecture plan for Cintas and providing thought leadership and guiding project execution.
Yes, the LinkedIn profile is accurate. That's correct.
That is accurate. You've composed an accurate bio for yourself there. That's great. So before we get into that, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in technology and how you wound up at Cintas?
Sure. I came out of college, came to Cincinnati, and started with a small consulting firm that did healthcare consulting. That company was called Digineer at the time, and they were kind of a startup. So they're like 100 people or like 150 people at their largest. And so they made software like healthcare software for big universities and hospitals. Like They built a diabetes management system and things like that. It's pretty cool. So I started there. I was a developer, did a lot of web-based code, which at the time in the late 90s or late 2000s was the big thing. And, did a lot of VB and ASP and .NET code and transitioned into Java, J2E a little bit. So my background is as a developer, transitioned into senior development, team lead type stuff. And again, mostly on the web side. I did a lot with web technologies, building websites, but mostly for enterprises. So for companies, as we talked about, whether it's a medical website. I created one of the first websites for pharmaceuticals. So that was kind of an interesting time. But as many startups do during the dot-com bubble, they spent more money than they really had, and ended up trying to transition from consulting and building websites to trying to build products. And they kind of ended up spending their way through all their funding and ended up going out of business.
Yeah, I remember that period.
Early 2000s.
I went to a party in LA where one of these tech companies actually rented a llama.
Yeah. Well, they had nice facilities. So they built a brand new building, of course, they had $10 million or something. It seemed like a lot back then, right? Just having completed like a $200 million project doesn't seem like much anymore. But so they built a new building, all the facilities that, you would expect of a startup. So we moved on, and luckily, right across the parking lot from where they had built their new building was the Cintas headquarters.
That's convenient.
It is convenient. So I ended up finding a home at Cintas. Cintas is a professional services company. 80% of our business, 85% of our business is uniform rental and facility service. So uniform rental meaning, your machine shops, your mechanics, your hotel workers, anyone who wears a uniform, they're either going to buy that uniform and they're going to take it home and wash it every day, which we sell uniforms. But what most people want to do is they just want to come to work with clean clothes and then just leave the dirty clothes there. And then we come and we basically leave them 5 changes of clothes a week. And there's one extra to kind of tide you over, I guess, from week to week. So you have 11 shirts, you got like 6 pairs of pants, and we pick those up every week, and then we launder them. We bring them back the next week, and then we repeat the process. When we bring them back, we pick up the dirties, launder those, and bring them back. So that's how Cintas started and it actually started with towels. So if you think about like a shop where you have towels that you're getting dirty every week, they used to just buy towels and throw them away. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute, you could just rent them from us and we'll wash them and we'll bring you clean ones every week. And it's, obviously from an environmental perspective, obviously much more environmentally friendly, but also cheaper because they aren't paying as much for these towels. In fact, they don't have to buy towels, they just rent them. So that's kind of how we started Cintas Towel and Service, and then transitioned in the 50s and 60s to actually uniform rental. And then we added things like mats and mops for cleaning floors, and then restroom services like the towels, the soap dispensers, the air fresheners, and things like that in restrooms. So we have a very wide variety of business services that we offer. And Cintas, was pretty much 180 degrees from anything that was happening at Digineer. So, Digineer had game rooms and relaxation rooms and whatever else. And Cintas was a little more on the conservative side. So I went from wearing shorts and t-shirt to shirt and tie and suits every day. Cintas was much more conservative, big company. So it was a bit of a culture shock for me. And, when I started, I honestly didn't think I'd be here very long. I was like, man, I'm just not going to be able to do what I want to do here. But as time went on, I started working on some things. I ended up building an ordering website for our SSRs. That went pretty well.
And just for those that don't know, SSR.
Yeah, SSR, Service Sales Representative. Our SSRs are the drivers who actually go on this route. So they're the ones out there picking up the uniforms, dropping off the clean ones, and doing whatever else needs to be done, whether they could be filling a first aid cabinet, they could be, servicing fire extinguishers. All of the services that we offer are done by various SSRs. We call them service sales reps because, primarily service, but they're also sales, meaning that they're trying to sell additional services to our customers. So making sure that our customers know what else we offer, and they're constantly trying to get additional revenue out of our current customers. I was in what we call our emerging technologies team, and web was emerging technology at the time. But I started transitioning into more and more responsibility in terms of taking on leadership roles and things like that, and working with new technologies. And so I just kept finding more and more projects, more and more things that I wanted to do. So I ended up, it's been almost 15 years now, and I just keep going from one thing to the next, thinking that, well, this will probably be the last thing I do here. And then, that they keep coming up with new and better and more exciting things for me to work on. So honestly, it's a bit of a surprise that I've been here this long, but I'm happy that it's been this long, and I'm happy that I've been able to do the things that I've wanted to do here. 15
years is kind of unheard of in technology, but with a company like Cintas, it's probably pretty standard, right?
Yeah, so we have a wall of fame, we call it, where you got your 15-year partners, which is like, it's a rotating thing. There's so many people that have worked here for 15 years. You can't put them all on the wall at the same time.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't have walls that are long enough. So 15 years for me, it feels like, at Cintas, you're just getting started. And then, so the next group is the 20 years and then the 25 years. And then you have some people who have been, working here between like 25 and 30 years. It seems like a lifetime, but it's actually a pretty big group of people that have been here that long. So yeah, you're absolutely right. At a company like Cintas, with the stock price, once you get into all the financials and everything else, it just makes sense to stick around.
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you wound up with Propelics? How did you find Propelics, and what were some of the things that you were looking for in a tech partner?
Well, it's interesting. We have a couple enterprise partners that we used pretty extensively. We went through a period of what we call outsourcing, where you took all these people that used to do this job inside and you lay them off, and then you bring in this other company, and they're supposed to do the job better and more efficiently than these people that you had doing the job before. So we had two of those companies in-house, and as part of a project that we were doing with Pomeroy, we were looking at device management type technology. And they brought in their brand new shiny partner at the time, Propelics, and Eric came on site. And they just talked a little bit about, MDM and device management and what it means. And Eric was kind of there just to listen and talk. He kind of gave his spiel about Propelics and about what they do. But it was all kind of subbed through this other company, Pomeroy. And we ended up actually doing a Kickstart workshop with Eric and with Propelics, with Pomeroy involved, and that was kind of the intro into Propelics for us. At Cintas, we didn't really have what I would call any sort of mobile strategy. We have a lot of mobility within Cintas, but we didn't really have a good mobile strategy in terms of what we wanted to do in the future with mobility and how we wanted to deal with these new devices that now everybody has. Our SSRs, our drivers have devices, but that was pretty unique. People didn't regularly carry around this electronic brick with them. So it was pretty unique to them and to their job. But now everybody has one of these, and they probably have two or three of them, right? They've got their personal device. They may have a work-provided device, like a push-to-talk maybe, and then they may have their brick, one of their portable route computers that has, the company app on it. So we've done mobility at Cintas, but it never really had a strategy to it. It was just, we got to give them a device so that we want to eliminate all this processing that happens at the end of the day. Previously it was all on paper. So they would have all these invoices and all these things that they take with them on the route, this paper, and they would mark it all up during the day, during their route, and then they'd dump it on somebody at the end of the day. And they would have to go through all 40 whatever routes and key it all into the back end. So as everything does at Cintas, everything starts as a cost savings. We're going to eliminate all these hours from these people who have to key the data in after hours. So, mobility was just a side effect of, we got to have a way for them to key this information in. And, oh, by the way, there's these huge, the devices that they started with, they called them Telzon portable devices, MS-DOS devices. They were the size of I don't know, they were the size of an iPad in terms of the length and width, but the depth was more like the size of a brick. I mean, it was like two bricks put together. So that's kind of how it all started.
Were those the ruggedized devices?
Yeah. So they were ruggedized, but this was early, very early days. They had a Wi-Fi radio on them, so they would sync wirelessly. And they ran MS-DOS, and we had an MS-DOS version of our CoPilot app. It was revolutionary at the time for Cintas, just to put in the hands of the SSR a device that would give them this ability to make these changes on the fly versus having to wait till they get back to it at the end of the day.
At the risk of sounding too much like a commercial, so what was it about Propelics that really stood out for you?
To me, it was just the fact that they are not trying to sell Propelics. They're not trying to further the ends of Propelics. They come off as really genuinely interested in the success of Cintas and the success of our mobile strategy. And that's the root of it is, Eric and Shahab and Larry and those guys are all genuinely interested in the success of Cintas and our mobile strategy. So that to me is a differentiator out there, because you have so many of these companies that do mobile strategy or do mobile projects, and they're just interested in the next project. They're just there to say, okay, we're done with this. What's next? What are you doing next? They don't really care about our program, about Cintas, about the success of the program. They just want the next project. And that's, to me, is the differentiator. I mean, just the fact that I don't know how many people have done Cintas ride-alongs with our drivers. It's got to be in the dozens of people that Eric has put on a truck. And, from himself to, his other partners, all the way down to the QA testers and the people who test our apps. They make the investment in the relationship and in the success of Cintas the primary goal of their relationship. And that to me is what first stood out, I think, as part of that first kickstart, and what has continued to keep us involved through the many, many projects that we've done.
Yeah, I haven't been on a truck yet myself, but I know that Adam and Nitin, and I know I have to get out there.
Get you out there. Yeah. Not a problem.
The whole company the entire business model is just around creating value for our clients and enabling them to, produce mobile solutions that just create value for the company. And it's so exciting for us whenever we, when we identify those areas that need or that can benefit the most by going mobile or by being converted over to a mobile process. And when things can be simplified down, it's really rewarding for all of us. So
that's good to hear. I'm glad you're not all just really good actors and faking it.
Well, I am. That's not to say that I'm not a great actor.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive. That's probably true.
Yeah. Don't ask my wife, though. She won't. I don't think she would. So how did you guys get ramped up internally, when you knew that you wanted to move forward?
We actually didn't do a whole lot of ramp up. We had some existing mobile resources that were working on our current enterprise apps for our SSRs. So we had some infrastructure in place already from a resource perspective, but we didn't go out and hire a bunch of developers. We didn't go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Really, the investments we made were very strategic in terms of just filling some gaps in what we had. Again, because we have done mobile for so long, we already have a lot of the pieces in place. It's coming up with the strategy and coming up with the little bridges that'll get us into a successful long-term strategy. So, we ended up doing our MDM selection, ended up going with AirWatch at the time. That's been a bit of a journey. And then we ended up hiring a mobility architect to kind of supplement me and do some of the things that I wouldn't have time for. But really, it's leveraging the people and resources we already had in place. And then Propelics really enabled us to expand and do things that our internal resources may not be ready for or may not have time for because they're busy doing other things. So, early on in our relationship with Propelics, they weren't really doing a lot of development projects in-house, but they You guys have developed that over time, and that's really been, for us, that's been a godsend in terms of just being able to rely on the same partner to, help us with our strategy and also help us with actually developing the apps and actually getting them done. From my perspective, having one partner that does it all is very crucial. Not that we were looking for that initially, but as we've progressed and grown and had other needs that, we haven't been able to fill internally, it's just been very convenient for us to keep the same, it's the same relationship, the same people we know, the same results, over and over again. I honestly don't know that we would still be Propelics. I mean, we would still probably have some strategy things. But it would be very, on an as-needed basis versus, we've been engaged with Propelics on projects for a good, probably 2 years straight now in terms of one after the other, from RouteBook to strategy workshops to the CoPilot development. It's just been one after the other that we've been able to keep you guys pretty busy, I think.
Yeah, it's been great. What was like the last straw for you guys? What was it that finally made you say that, we need to change things around here? We need to get rid of the Windows devices or the bricks.
That wasn't the initial goal, by the way. It wasn't an anti-Microsoft, anti-Windows strategy. It was really about trying to understand where the consumer market is going because, enterprise has always been very comfortable with Windows Mobile, and the Windows Mobile devices, they've got, 5-year lifespans, whereas, your typical iPhone is on a 18-month turnover cycle. So from our perspective, it's really understanding who are the new players in this more consumer world that will help support us from an enterprise perspective, from a device perspective, because that's really what we needed. Was we still needed the enterprise class support, but we wanted all the nice features, right, that all these new consumer devices have. If you take an iPhone compared to, our old Windows Mobile CN3 or CN70 device, it's night and day difference. Just in terms of what can be done on the device itself. So to answer your question, it wasn't we got to get away from Windows Mobile. It was there's this whole new world out there of consumer devices and people have these mobile devices. It was really just trying to understand how that impacted the company and the enterprise and how we should look to incorporate those into our future strategy for each of the divisions that we have.
Let's get into the products that we created for you guys a little bit.
Sure.
First off, what problems did we help solve for you? I guess, the problems were solved by a combination of us and the capabilities of the devices.
Right. So the first problem that we ended up solving was related to our route drivers, our SSRs. And they today, like we mentioned, they have their portable route computer that they go out and that has their customer data on it, has their invoice data on it, and they can make changes and do maintenance and things like that. But at the time, those devices don't have GPS. Those devices don't have, any sort of routing capabilities. There's no ability to do any notes or picture taking or anything like that. So we came up with this idea is creating what we call a RouteBook. And a RouteBook is actually a paper thing today at our locations. Is they have this binder for each route. So location can have anywhere from like 20 to 40 routes. So there's a binder that they create with paper, and each stop has one sheet of paper that has, here's the directions, turn-by-turn directions. They write it out by hand of how to get from the previous stop to the next stop. And then when you get to this stop, here's some things that you need to know about it. Maybe there's some safety hazards there. Maybe you need some special equipment. Maybe there's someone you need to talk to, or there's a security code, or there's maybe a key that you need. And all this information was stuck in these paper binders. So what happens is when one driver is on vacation, they basically run the same route every week. So when they're on vacation, someone else has to run that route. And without this paper binder being up to date, they basically have to take the week beforehand and run the route with them to shadow them and say, okay, here's how the route is basically run. And then the next week they're kind of on their own and they're just doing it by themselves and trying to get through it. And what happens with these paper binders is with anything paper is as soon as you have one change, you have one additional customer or one leaves or, the order changes, those things are all out of date and you got to recreate them from scratch. So we came up with the idea of making that RouteBook electronic and putting all those notes and directions and everything into a device. And we started on an iPad. We were going to we're going to push iPads out in the trucks, have them truck mounted, and do all that. We ended up switching to BYOD, so pushing it to the SSR smartphones. All of our SSRs now have their own smartphones. And so we transitioned from building an iPad app to a cross-platform smartphone app. And this was a much bigger success for us in terms of, you don't have to buy devices. All you have to really worry about is reimbursing SSRs for usage of their cell phones, which we already do anyway.
It's amazing how much benefit can be had just from taking paper manuals or paper materials of almost any kind and converting them over to digital. We did a prototype for United Airlines where they wanted to digitize their flight assistance guidebook. And you wouldn't think about it, but I mean, not only it just makes it easier to search and sort and everything, but just the weight of the manuals alone. Every flight attendant has to have one of these manuals. And so the manuals are a couple of pounds each. So they calculated that they would save like hundreds of thousands of gallons of jet fuel.
For us, the paper is part of it, but for us, it's labor savings. If you have this good documentation on a route, anyone can come run that route, and it's about improving our customer service, because when that SSR is on vacation, you have somebody who really doesn't know those customers or know that route very well, and without any sort of accurate documentation, they're just not going to do a very good job. So it's about improving the consistency of our customer service, about reducing the hours needed for those people who are subbing. So if they're subbing and they get lost, we pay these guys hourly, so it's going to add a lot of time and overhead to that route. So, reducing the amount of time in terms of them getting lost or them not knowing what to do, and then also improving the level and the quality of our consistency of our customer service.
So you've touched on this already a little bit, but how were you able to leverage BYOD devices? So were they all iPhones or iOS and Android? Both?
iOS and Android, yeah. So we made the decision early on to support both iOS and Android. Our SSRs are typically not buying the latest and greatest phones, so we had to support even a little earlier versions of OSs than we would have wanted to. When you're going consumer, Android really is still, it may not have the mind share, but it really has the majority of phones. If you look at the whole economy and in general, I think you really have to support Android if you're going to. And we have, if you're going to a large numbers of people, and we have about 30,000 or so employees across the U.S. So we really need to support, the both major platforms.
And how has this new wave of enterprise mobility changed the way you're able to service your customers?
It changes the way that we interact with our customers. So we can have more information for our SSRs at their fingertips. So in the past, it's always been a wait, ask a question, wait to get an answer, I'll get back to you sort of thing. But with the new devices, we have a lot more information at their fingertips that they can really answer questions. And if they have a billing question, if they have an inventory question, if they have an invoice question, the SSRs are going to have all the information at their fingertips to answer those questions. From a back-end perspective, the cellular connectivity of these new devices allows us to basically, if they are requesting new things, so if they have a new wearer or if they have new garments that they want to add, allows us to start sooner in terms of making those requests and getting those fulfilled. It gives us almost an extra day to process customer orders through and making sure that our customers get things the next time we go out there. So it gives us more time to get that process started to make sure that we're able to get things out to our customers when we see them next. I'd say those are the two biggest things.
Time savings is always a big one for companies. The other feature that I really liked about RouteBook was that it allowed the user to draw So you could take a picture of a garment or whatever and then draw to indicate where there was maybe some staining or damage or whatever, just to scrawl a note with your finger right on the device. And then we also provided some map drawing capabilities. It's so much easier than typing to just draw a quickie map and say, like, here's where you want to park, or watch out, there's construction going on here, so avoid that area, whatever it takes.
With the new devices, obviously, drawing is one of those things that, with a pen and everything, it's much easier to do than it is on paper. So when we started looking at that feature, it was like we just gave them a blank canvas and just let them draw whatever. And then we quickly realized that not everyone was going to have the artistic skills of Andres.
Right.
So we ended up very quickly coming up with this approach of every major corporate building you go to or business is going to have a diagram with your evacuation plan on it. Every single one is going to have that because it's required by law. So all they have to do is find this or ask for this evacuation plan. They can take a picture of it, and then what they can do is they can annotate on it. And what we provided was this bank of icons that says, okay, here's where the uniforms go, here's where there's a mat, here's where a fire extinguisher is. So they can take this picture, they can drop these icons on there, and they instantly have this easily referenceable tool that anyone can look at and say, okay, I don't have to write out 20 paragraphs of instructions of here's where everything is. I just look at this one map and, oh, that's where everything goes. Okay, easy enough. So that was one of our learnings from the early versions of the app is we initially thought, well, we're just going to draw everything out. But this really simple approach of taking something that already exists, a drawing that already exists, and annotating it was a much better, much more effective approach.
So let's get into CoPilot a little bit. How does
Sure.
CoPilot differ from RouteBook?
So RouteBook was originally designed as an augmentation to CoPilot, and it still is. When we talked about the early days of mobility at Cintas, CoPilot was the first app really that we built. We call it CoPilot because it's really the partner with the SSR to help them through their day, right? It gives them all the information they need to service their customers. And that's how it came about is a supplement to all this paper that they have. They have one device where they can go and they can make changes and they can have all the information right at their fingertips. So it became CoPilot as a kind of a branding terminology, but it really is something. It's like their partner as they go out there on the day. And so CoPilot has things like all the invoices. So at Cintas, we actually print invoices ahead of time before we go to the customer, and then there are actually adjustments made while they're there. So we know ahead of time kind of about what the invoice is going to be, but the SSR can change it. So if for some reason, someone is on vacation, or maybe they didn't bring their garments in this week or something like that, they can make adjustments on the fly. They can change quantities. They can zero out a line. So if somebody left, maybe we don't want to charge them for that. So they have the flexibility to make a lot of changes to these invoices. So CoPilot really is the app that allows them to see all this information. They can see all the wearers. They can see what facility services items we need to, how many mats or towels or whatever else we need to drop off. And then it just has the older versions just had a stop by stop. You go to the first stop, then you go to the next stop, and it just everything was just right there for them. So that's CoPilot kind of in a nutshell. Is it's really just their reference material for what they need to service the route. When we talked earlier about RouteBook, it didn't have this other information, notes about the customer, driving directions, because the earlier devices just didn't have that capability. So that's when we decided to redesign CoPilot with a new device. We knew that from the very beginning that we wanted to merge together CoPilot and RouteBook. So now it's all one thing. There's a separate RouteBook database that still has all the information in it, but from a user perspective, it's one UI, one app.
And so CoPilot also helped open up like additional selling opportunities for SSRs, right? Like kind of extended that sales process a little more.
We wanted to give them some tools, right, to help them, as an SSR sales service representative, want to give them additional tools to help them sell. So some things that we did is we gave them the ability to see items that a customer is allowed to have. So there's a concept of an agreement that we sign with a customer that they sign up for a certain number of products, a certain things at certain prices, and then they may not put all of those things into service. So what we did was we created this list of things that the customers signed up to have, but they don't currently get. And this is a big thing like with national accounts, like a hotel chain or something like this, where they sign a national agreement saying these are the things that they can have, but the local branches don't necessarily know everything that's on that agreement. So this kind of tool would help the SSR know, hey, they could have these other things, and that would give them the ability to know what to upsell with each customer. So it has some additional selling tools, but there's a lot of other things we want to add in the future. The ability to do more direct sales. So things like they will sell Gatorade or water in the summer, and in the winter they'll sell things like rock salt, things like that. So just the ability to have promotions and things like that that they can push directly from the device. Those are all kind of future capabilities we're looking to add.
I love hearing the kind of follow-up stuff about, features that we thought were brilliant at the time, like drawing on the screen, only to find out that it was just too
I
clumsy
think
for people.
that happens a lot in the mobile world, doesn't it? I mean, you think
it does.
This is going to save the world, right? And then you get it out there, and people are like, "Yeah, this doesn't work."
Yeah, we're not doing that.
We're not doing that.
Were there any other aspects of CoPilot or RouteBook that either flopped or alternately that actually provided benefits that you weren't expecting?
One of the unexpected things that came out of RouteBook really just came from user feedback as we started getting it out there. And this is a very interesting thing, is that when you key in an address, right, you think that you could take that address, dump it into Google Maps, and you would get to where you want to go. I mean, 99 times out of 100 even, that's going to be the case. And one of our first pilot locations for RouteBook was actually in rural Alabama. And they're like, well, the address that we have here is some rural route number, and that's like 3 actual miles from where we actually need to deliver these uniforms.
Wow.
So we quickly had to come up with this idea of a delivery point, which gives the SSR the ability to say, okay, this is the customer address where maybe they receive mail or they receive their invoice. But this is actually where this building is, and it might not even have an address. It could be like this storeroom, which is on the back lot of this 300-acre site. So they're out there looking in Google Maps, and here's that building. They can drop a pin, and now they can get directions directly to exactly where they need to go. And this was one of those things that you just, when you're designing an app, you're like, it's an address. I can just dump it into Google Maps and get directions. And these guys are like, not here.
Right.
So that was one of the very unexpected things that came out of the RouteBook process.
Yeah, and it's amazing that even when there is a problem like that was completely unforeseen, the solution is usually pretty simple. Just, okay, well, we're going to implement this. You just drop an additional pin and add a label, and there you go.
Exactly.
Problem solved.
So that actually gave us the ability to do a couple other things, with those pins. Is you can, if you got like a campus or things like that where you have multiple stops, they can drop multiple pins on there and get directions from point to point. So it was a powerful feature once we realized the problem. But until you get the app out there, a lot of times you don't realize the problem. And that's a common problem in mobile, and something that we're still not great at is trying to get the app out there faster, so that you can get people using it, because until you get it out there, you really don't know how it's going to be used and what's going to be used.
Exactly. And it shows that even when, we send guys out there with your drivers on a bunch of ride-alongs, sometimes even that's not enough.
No, until somebody's actually using the app and using what you built, you really don't know. You really have no idea.
So what are you guys thinking about doing in the near future?
Well, the only thing on my mind is CoPilot, but we're trying to go live in 3 weeks for our first location. So we're really excited about that, and we'll be rolling out to all of our 300 or so locations over the next 18 months. The first thing that we're doing immediately is we have what we call a helper scanner app, which allows it's a companion app to CoPilot to allow our SSRs to have another person ride along with them. So when they're out there picking up dirty clothes, they actually scan each one of those garments that's out there. So a lot of times that can be up to 2,000 to 3,000 garments per stop. And you just physically think of the amount of time it takes to scan 3,000 garments. It can take a long time.
Sure.
So today they actually have a hardware device that they use, a dumb scanner that they connect to and scan. But the problem with that device is there's no validation what's scanned. So they could be scanning something, it could get an incomplete read, or it could be somebody's garment from from somewhere else and not realize it. This helper scanner app will allow us to eliminate the additional hardware, but also provide additional validation and things like that. So you'll have actually 2 of our devices out there, one that's a primary device and one that's kind of an assistant device helping. So that's kind of the immediate thing, and then there'll be additional enhancements to CoPilot over the rollout period. After that, we're looking to do 2 things. The first one is a contracts app, and this is for SSRs and for our sales reps actually, to allow them to electronically gather our contracts and agreements. And this allows them to basically take that information and import it directly into SAP, which is the back end of all of our. It's really the reason we did this new version of CoPilot, is to go along with SAP. So this new contracts app will allow them to electronically have the customer sign and do all the things that they need to do to capture a new business. And for our SSRs, it'll be for renewals. So most of our agreements are like 3 to 5 year agreements, but they can renew at any time. So we want to give the SSRs an electronic ability to capture those renewals and just get those back into the system quickly. So that's one thing that we're looking at. And the other one is a tool for our service managers. These are the people who kind of sit above the SSRs, who manage the relationships with our customers. And so the service manager app would be something where they can see basically all the customer information, their agreements, their history in terms of scanning, their history in terms of financial history, just a job aid essentially for our service managers to allow them to be more mobile. Today they have laptops or desktop probably for most of them, and so they have to actually create physical folders of things when they go and visit their customers. And when they're out in the field, you know, if they want to stop by a different customer, they wouldn't have that information with them. So this just frees up our service managers to be out visiting our customers, doing goodwills, getting renewals, things like that more often.
I remember discussing all these ideas in our original ideation, which I think was like a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, the ideation workshop, yeah.
It's nice to see all these ideas coming to fruition now.
You know, all the ideas are still valid. It takes longer than to implement a lot of these things than you would think it would. The problem is we had this huge back-end disruption. So we're going from a distributed AS400 system to a centralized SAP system, and there's just a lot of dramatic change going on from the back-end perspective. So the mobile side is kind of going along with that change. As each area gets impacted, we're trying to mobilize and extend that back-end system so that our employees aren't tied to, you know, a desktop with SAP GUI on it.
Are you guys exploring any like really fancy technologies at all, like virtual reality for training or anything like that?
We're not looking at VR. You would think that with all of our garments and everything, we'd be a big IoT type customer, but we really did investigate like RFID and all those technologies a long time ago and just never found a good return on it for us. So it's not something that we're looking at in the near future either. We might outfit the SSR with more technology in terms of maybe wearables, maybe a wearable scanning device or a wearable, just like a watch or anything that might kind of enhance their productivity without having to pull out their device all the time. If they can kind of see things quickly, might be something we're looking at. But other than that, we don't have a lot of emerging technology kind of visions right now, but probably something that we'll look at as things settle down with this rollout of CoPilot and we figure out kind of where we want to go next.
Well, Russ, thanks a lot for hopping on.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that my suit is out of the dry cleaners the next time I...
I'm going to get you on a route. You're still in Boston, right?
Yeah.
I'll make sure we get you on a route out there.
The last time we were out there, I think it was like a 2-week engagement, and I literally had a suit that I did not have time to tailor that was like the pants were being held up by like safety pins and stuff. It's pretty funny.
It is actually pretty funny.
Thanks for hopping on, Russ, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye, Russ. Talk to you soon.
Bye.